Hello, hello. Welcome to another live stream from the Profit Playbook. This is Rachel and Colin. Today, we're going to talk about this concept of the 5 mile race. Do you want to explain a little bit about what that means and why you should watch?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was kind of an analogy that I came up with because we know that the different areas of business are kind of happening independently, but they also all tie together. And so for anyone who's ever done like a 5K or a 10K, maybe a 10K, if you were trying to get your best time you've ever got, you know how fast you need to run each mile. And so the idea was, how do we kind of create this concept where the third mile is just as important as the last mile? Like each one has to fit together in order to deliver the ultimate time that you want. And it's the same way with business. And so that was kind of the idea, was treating the business like 5 independent miles, but they all have to be running at a similar pace for us to hit the number that we ultimately want to get to.
Yeah, what we see a lot with businesses is that they have these, like they have a 2024 goal or whatever, and they are only tracking the last mile, or maybe they're only tracking the first mile. And so then it's really hard to say if you're on pace to hit the goal if you're not tracking every single one of those miles. And you can't see if one of the miles becomes off track. And then it's harder to correct if you don't have this in place. So that's what we're going to go over today.
Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah, the whole point here is to make sure that your business is running like a well-oiled machine. So you know what's working, what's not working, and you can course correct very quickly if something starts not working. What else do you have to say before we dive into the 5 miles?
Yeah. No, I think you said it. Like the well-oiled machine, sometimes different areas of the business get kind of disjointed and disconnected from each other. Especially once we get to a business that has a little higher level of professionalism. You've got members on the team who are really passionate about their area. They're all charging as far as they can in their kind of personal direction. But, if we're trying to get to a 10 average or a 10-minute mile, you don't want to run mile 1 at 15 minutes, mile 2 at 5 minutes, right? That makes no sense. Like we need to kind of get the entire thing flowing in a consistent way. And so that's really what the 5 mile race is all about.
How has this worked for you and the businesses that you've implemented it?
Yeah. So this concept originally came up because it was kind of a challenge to think about, like, what if you were on a remote island somewhere? Like, what would you want to see? And I think the exercise was something to the effect of, you're on a remote island somewhere, and once a day, someone can just walk up and hand you a single piece of paper. What would that paper have on it to know if the business is healthy and doing well and thriving and making sense or not? And so that, of course, we originally listed out, a million different things. And then you kind of start paring it down and realizing that realistically, the 5 mile race is built around the 5 areas of health for kind of the output of a company. And so that was the kind of initial idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should we give a little preview about what the 5 miles are and then dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we've got mile number 1, the sales pipeline. Mile 2, closed deals. Mile 3, completed work. Mile 4, invoicing and collecting. And mile 5, cash on hand. That's your overview for what we're going to be talking about. And then we're going to go into each one.
Yep.
So let's start out mile 1, sales pipeline. What should you be looking at?
Yeah. So the idea here is that, and again, one of the easiest ways to think about the 5 mile race when you kind of really kind of get it is thinking about, what if I understood all the other areas of my business and this one was kind of this like black hole that I couldn't see into, that didn't make any sense. And so what we see a lot is companies who are obsessed over what their ultimate revenue numbers are, which we'll talk about. That's mile 4. But they're not focused upstream enough, right? Maybe they're thinking about closing deals, but what does your pipeline look like? Because we know that the pipeline has to be there to be able to close deals. And so, we talked about in our previous live stream about having that consistent unit of measure. We call it the critical unit. So thinking about, we know we're not going to close 100% of deals. Like, how big of a pipeline do we need to get X number of units across the finish line and available for our team to work on?
This is the biggest lead measure of your company. So it predicts what's going to happen the rest of the race, is how healthy your pipeline is at the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. And we talked about empowered pricing. Like, I could tie this back to every single thing we've ever talked about, because I always say, if you have a giant top of funnel, if there's so much demand for your service, it's going to improve your pricing. You're going to be able to invest long-term in your product. You're going to have the confidence to invest in your team and the product. You're going to have the ability to pick the right kind of customers, not only that you can help, but who are the right kind of people to do business with. So the pipeline is massive. And I think for a lot of people, they only focus on that kind of last stage of the pipeline. Like, they're just so itching for another deal to close. Mm-hmm. They're not getting a good enough view on the big picture pipeline.
Yep. And this is where you can really see trends and course correct very quickly. So if you're doing a steady pace in your pipeline and all of a sudden it drops off, like, whoa, you know that in a few months, depending on your sales cycle, a few months, that's going to impact your operations. It's going to impact your revenue, but you can course correct very quickly when you see it way back here in the sales pipeline.
Yeah, I love that. And I think of the 5 mile race as a whole as kind of like this series of 5 check engine lights, right?
Yeah.
That if they start flashing, we know, like, hey, we can now pinpoint the problem. That's one of the big things about the 5 mile race concept. As we talk about it today, once you learn like where each of them should be independently to where they make sense together, now my check engine light isn't just, I kind of feel like a lot of times we chase around in business like whack-a-mole. Like, you're just kind of like, I see a problem, we got to go over there.
Yep.
Once we can zoom out and say, I need a pipeline that's 5 times bigger than the deals that I closed this month, because that's my normal closing ratio. Like, bingo, the light bulbs go off. Now we have 2 things that make sense together. It just starts to stitch together an entire picture that has so much more value.
Yeah, that's where it gets exciting. What's different about mile 2, closed deals?
Yeah, so closed deals is exactly what it sounds like. It's, and this is one that most companies are obsessing over, right? And I know, like, let's say you have a retail store, some of these things might be compressed to where, you might look at your pipeline as how many people are coming in the store versus the number of transactions or the volume of transactions that you're closing, right? There is that for every business. There's some version of that. And so the closed deals themselves obviously are, a lifeblood of the business. We have to have new work coming in. We can survive for a little while on the work that's already happening in most businesses, but we need that constant flow of new that's coming in.
Yeah. That leads us to mile 3, unless you have something else you want to say about mile 2.
Yeah, I would just say, everybody, most businesses, almost all businesses are looking at closed deals. The big thing I want to just drive the point home, I kind of mentioned, learn what your pipeline needs to be to close the deals that you want. And so one of the things with the 5 mile race is, it is not good enough to know where it is today. These are all about trends and tracking over time, so that you then learn, like, well, we have $1 million in pipeline. We're going to have 150K a month. Like, I can count on that. Could go as high as 250, but I know it's never going to come below 100 or whatever that is. So having that kind of relevant understanding between the 2 parts is incredibly important for those first 2 legs of the race.
Yeah.
And so thinking about it that way, that's huge.
Mile 1 and mile 2 are like besties.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Mile 3 is where we're getting the work done. This is operations, completed work.
Yes. And interestingly, mile 2, if mile 1 and mile 2 are besties, like mile 3 is in the friend group, they kind of share mile 2. Mile 3 is about what work we're getting done right now. And one of the most important elements for work we're getting done now is, what do we recently close? Like, how much work is available to be done? 3 is ops. I mean, it is the most obvious part of business typically, because it's happening right in front of everyone. Usually it has the most, human resources dedicated to it. And so it's really about optimizing and tracking like how much is getting done. A lot of companies only think about we closed the deal and we got to bill for it.
Mhm.
And those two timelines are really important to them. Yes, they are. But how much work did we get done today? Because we see this time and time again, especially in a business that has like a 2 or 3 month work cycle. You lose track of like, what do we get done this week? And this week is critical for optimizing this for the long term.
Mhm. It's all about how efficiently you're getting the work done in here. And so, like you said, a lot of people say, well, we close a deal and then we look at how quickly we're able to invoice for it. But there's so much data and valuable insight in between there where this is where the critical unit comes in. You can say, how quickly are you moving this product or this service? And it's so important to be constantly pushing your team to be faster and more efficient with how they're getting the work done, because that means you can invoice faster.
Yeah. Yeah. What's crazy is, if you take, like, I've got a whole stack of books back here, probably 70% of business books are written about, some version of how to optimize mile 3, because all of the things about how to engage our team get, where we created the critical unit. The critical unit is really like what we need to see through ops. And then we expand it out through the rest of business, in both directions. But everything about, like, I'm a huge proponent of lean, which is a manufacturing process Toyota developed around just essentially how to do things more efficiently. Like, don't set your tools in the other room and then you have to go get them all the time. Put them right in front of you, right where you need them. Tool you use with your left hand goes in front of your left hand is where it's stored. It's like getting really granular with efficiency, all elements of team efficiency, smoothing things out. Almost all of that is really designed around this mile 3, because ultimately mile 3 is where the bulk of your profit comes from. Like, you have to have enough volume of sales, yes, to be profitable, but harvesting profit comes down to being able to efficiently get the work done.
Mhm. And when we see companies do this really well, it almost is like operations and sales are like opposing levers,
Yeah.
or they're kind of fighting to
It's a
see.
tug of war.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, this is
absolutely.
what one of our clients is going through right now, is that they've just put a ton into operations and made that so efficient and they're producing so much. Well, now the pressure's on sales to keep up that level of demand so that ops doesn't run out of work to do. And so it's really cool when sales and ops can kind of battle out for who's winning.
Yes. Yes. No, you want this to be, I think that battle you're describing, you should be that, like, a company should be that duck on water, right? Like, it may to the outside world look like you're just killing it and everything's successful and everything's great. Underwater, it is just a battle constantly. It is just pure kind of organized chaos, because, yeah, that tug of war is like, ops is so efficient. Now the old amount of sales isn't enough anymore. Like, they can get more work done. So then sales finally gets it clicked in place and they figure it out. And now they bring this tidal wave of new work. And ops is like, well, we can't do that with the current team. We need more people. And maybe our onboarding isn't as efficient as the old team who knew how to do it really well. So it's just this never ending kind of turnover and challenge. But that's what's fun about it.
Yeah,
That's the ever evolving 3D puzzle of running a business.
right. That's why you stay in business, is because there's always new challenges.
Absolutely.
Okay, ready to move on to mile 4?
Let's do it.
Okay, mile 4, invoicing and collecting.
Yeah. So invoicing and collecting, again, now we're switching. If we kind of were to really zoom out and think about the 5 mile race in segments, 1 and 2 is sales, 3 is really ops, and then 4 and 5 are starting to get more finance. And I say that because depending on the business that you're in, you could run a restaurant, and in that restaurant, like we said, you think about how many people are in the restaurant, maybe how many people are calling for reservations. Some element of that's kind of your pipeline. You've got, the people who are in the restaurant now, they're a closed deal. They've taken a seat. They're there for ops, right? Now it's all about how efficiently we can serve them, and in the sales process, can we upsell them? All those elements. The invoicing and collections in that environment, if you're running a convenience store or restaurant, is pretty real time for the most part. But in a lot of businesses, I would say the vast majority of businesses that we work with, there is some element of timing in how you invoice and collect. And so invoice and collections are critical. I mean, we've said it before, cash is the oxygen and profitability is kind of the blood, right, in a business. And so you cannot live without cash for seconds. And so that's a really important part to think about when we're thinking about this 5-mile race, and is everything kind of synchronized and making sense? Are we really efficient, and are we tracking like how much we're able to invoice right now and how much we're able to collect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is where your either accounting team, your bookkeeper are very connected with ops to know when you're invoicing, especially if you're invoicing at the end of a project. But you should have processes in place to know, like, all right, we're approaching the end of the project. Let's let accounting know that we need to invoice, or whoever's doing your invoicing, so that you can get them out quickly. What is your relationship like with your customers? Are they paying quickly? That's very important. If you're having a delay and customers are taking a long time to pay you, you need to figure that out.
Yeah, no, I love that. And in kind of a more project-based business, sometimes you're able to build something in advance. Sometimes you have some sort of progress payments. One of the reasons we have this as an independent step from getting the work done, which we would call like earning revenue, is getting the work done, right? Invoicing, sometimes the timing of it is more of a negotiation, or it's more industry standard to work differently. It may be disconnected. So we need to kind of watch. This is why we want to see all 5 miles of the race, kind of zoom out and look at them all simultaneously, because it's important that each of them are happening. And sometimes that weird, funky timing can cause people just to kind of almost give up on one or the other. It's like, well, that's not really what matters. What matters is this. It's like, well, all of it really matters. You just need a more effective way of looking at it.
Right. Yeah. The whole point of the 5-mile race is that any one of them could cause issues for your company if you're not doing it right. And so that is why we set up the 5-mile race as we have, where this is one that a lot of people can kind of skip over. But if you're not doing invoicing and collecting right, that has a big impact on the health of your business.
Oh my gosh, I love what you just said. You just said something that, to me, like, the entire concept of the 5-mile race really comes down to, we can never win the race with only one of the miles, but we can absolutely lose the race with any one of the miles. If you just don't run that mile, you're not going to win. It's over. No matter how fast you run 1 mile, if you walk the rest of them, you're not going to win. And so kind of thinking about it in those terms is a great way to really summarize the concept.
Nice. Okay. What about mile 5? Cash on hand.
Yeah. Yeah. Mile 5 is cash on hand. So again, a lot of times we have questions. I've seen this with my business partners, and a challenge I've faced with myself within our businesses is like, how much cash do we need? Can I take some out? Are we going to run out? Like, where are we at? Can we afford to hire somebody? I mean, it's just a continual question. And so what's interesting is, and it's one of those where, like, when somebody asks you a question and then they don't like the answer that you give them,
Which happens
frequently
a lot.
yeah, we deal with that. It happens, right? But frequently that's because if somebody says, like, if a friend calls me up and says, hey, here's kind of a situation, can I pull some cash out of the business? I'm like, well, what's your pipeline look like? How fast is the team delivering on revenue? Like, it is not as simple as like a binary yes or no, you have enough cash or you don't. It's really about, like, are the 5 elements of the business synchronized? Because if you stop invoicing, it is not a good idea to pull out cash. If your team is bogged down and are getting very little work done, even though you might technically look like you have plenty of cash on hand, you need more money to service the work that's not done yet, that your team didn't get done. So that's why these things are all interconnected. But that's the big one with cash, is when I have all 5 and I understand, that's why we have it last. It's the equivalent of saying, like, okay, my goal was to run 10-minute miles. Coming into mile 5, I better be at 40 minutes or below. Like, I need to know where I'm at to know how to run the last mile of the race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is about finishing strong.
100%. And the goal for the business is that we can establish like, hey, based on the way the business operates, based on how the 5 miles work, based on what we know about how fast your collections are, how fast the team gets the work done, we know about your profitability, which comes from ops, we can say comfortably, this is the cap on what you need. You only need $300,000 in your business at any given time. So when you get up to 450 and everything is flowing smoothly, it's like, hey, we can take some money off the table. And that is a really fun conversation to have with people.
You're doing so well. You get to reap some of those rewards.
That's right.
Yeah, the cash, and as you're scaling or your goals are going up, this is where maybe 300K was your balance before, like that you felt good about, but you can also scale that and say, well, we're going to ramp up in the next 6 months. We want to have more cash on hand in case, because expenses are going to ramp up before sales do, for example.
Absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's our last mile marker. Anything that you want to say, wrap it up?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, like I said, you can think about a handful of other things. This is really about the financial side of your business. I would probably say if you were looking at like, 7 different things that you could do diagnostic across your business, you'd probably want to add something in about your team. You might want to add something about like the happiness of customers. But this is the 5-piece check engine light. If something is not working, even if it's that there's a problem within the team, something's going to show up within these 5. And so just remember that, and remember that they all need to work together. We can't win the race with any 1 mile, but we can definitely lose it. And so remembering it that way, hopefully will help kind of bring the point home for people.
Yeah. And this is what I love about the 5 mile race, is that if you're just starting off and you're like, I don't know what's going on with my business, this helps you diagnose where you need to focus your time. And then what we've seen people do is that, like, okay, we've narrowed in on ops. We need to focus on ops. They fix that up. And then they get to dive into, well, what's the next highest priority? Maybe that's sales. Maybe that's invoicing and collecting. Once you get through all 5 miles, you're running a really good business. Things are smooth. You can have a good night's sleep. This is where running a business gets fun, is when you get all 5 mile markers running.
Yes. And I think we may have mentioned earlier, but then this is where you engage the team. Now I have a set of diagnostics I can teach people, and they may be a functional leader in sales. So they're really owning 1 and 2, but they learn mile 3, mile 4, and mile 5. Now they can help me really run the company. So like you said, that's where it gets really fun. And that's where we start to actually make significant life-changing progress for the freedom of the owner, which is huge.
And hopefully get some more cash that you get to pull out of the business.
Yeah, that's fun.
That is fun. Okay, so today we are not having Q&A because we have a short time period that we're working with today, but we'll be back next week. If you're new here, this happens every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time. So we'll be back next week, but thanks for hanging out with us and chatting about the 5 mile race. All right. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.